Lakewood City Council for Monday, April 26th to order. The first item of business is a review of the 2020 financial report. And for this, we have Assistant City Manager, Finance Director, Todd Kraus.
Okay, I'm going to just share my screen. So before you is the 2020 year-end financial report, and I'm just going to highlight a couple things. What you're seeing here is the general and street fund results. So it's the combined general and street fund. And as you can see, our operating revenues compared to 2019, since 2019 is the full year prior to COVID. So we have a comparison of 2020 versus 2019. On the operating revenue side, we're down $2.1 million or 4.9%. And compared to the budget, a revised budget, we're up by 117,000 or 0.3%. And so you can see with all the negative numbers, the areas that have decreased. So one of the larger areas that have decreased is our gambling tax, which is down by $1.2 million compared to 2019 and about 890,000 compared to the budget. On the expenditure side, we are seeing savings of almost $3.6 million compared to 2019 and about $5.1 million compared to the budget. And so these savings are the result of the city manager's action strategies that were implemented effective March 2020. So the year-end result, we started the beginning balance for the general and street fund of almost $9.9 million. And with the additional, with the revenues coming in and the expenditures going out, we had an operating income of about $5.3 million. And just overall, our total revenues and other sources, so this includes our one-time sources as well as our regular ongoing revenues, total $44.6 million. And expenditures and other uses being one-time expenditures total $40.9 million. So we ended up the year with about almost $13.6 million, and that equates to 33% of the operating revenues. Our total reserves, as required by the financial policies, was $4.9 million. And with the 2% contingency reserves, that was about $824,000. And we needed $2.06 million for the 5% general fund reserves and the same amount for the 5% strategic reserves. So with all of that taken into consideration, we ended up with $8.6 million that is being reserved for the 2021 and 2022 budget. And part of that $8.6 million, we needed $1.8 million to implement the proposed carry forward budget adjustment that you'll see next. So that's really the high level of the results of the general and street fund operations. I'm happy to go into any further detail as the city council wishes.
Questions for Ms. Kraus? Looking for hands, looking for waves. I don't see any. So thank you very much. And now we'll move on to the 2021 carry forward budget adjustment.
So for, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so for the carry forward budget adjustment, I'm going to go over this very quickly as well as there's about 58 pages in that document that speaks to the carry forward budget adjustment.
Excuse me, Todd, you still have the financial report up from the last agenda item. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
And let the record reflect that Deputy Mayor Whalen has joined us.
Okay, so what I have here is the new request. And as I mentioned, all of the items that are in the carry forward are pretty well detailed. And so I'm only going to review some of the new program requests. I have this broken out by the different fund types. So overall on the new items, total $3.7 million or $3.8 million for all funds in 2021, an additional $1.4 million for 2022. And some of the new items here, the City Council has already seen, or they're either grant funded or we're making transfers from the general fund and the real estate excise tax funds to fund these new programs. So the Build Your Better campaign, that's $141,000. That is a new item. We have the Stop VAWA 2021 grant. It's a pretty big number for that type of grant. It's $30,000, but again, grant funded. We had City of Tacoma radio user fees increase of $28,000. And we put in the budget on a one-time basis, $250,000 increase for jail services. We are also making some transfers to the park CIP. The general fund is contributing $564,000 in 21, and in 2022, another $75,000. We're also requesting that real estate excise tax provide some funding to transportation projects, and those are identified for the Silicon Boulevard, Far West to Phillips, and also the South Tacoma Way. That totals $139,000 in 2021 and another $624,000 in 2022. We have in the property abatement fund, which includes the rental housing safety program, at the end of 2020, there was a deficit of $24,000. And so we're asking the general fund contribute to that. Rental housing safety program has been a priority for the city, and this really just shows that we're not taking in as much money, but yet we're doing the work for that program. The Arts Commission funding, we're requesting an additional $3,000 to do the signal box wraps for the 4 that have been identified. For the grant funds, we've received some new programs. You've heard about the COVID-2 CDBG CARES money, but we also received some new grants for public safety, and those are from the Washington State Parks and Washington State Patrol. On the park CIP side, you'll see that we have about 5 new projects, or 5, not necessarily new projects, but additional funding that is requested. We're putting in $10,000 for Harry Todd Park, but that's being funded by a contribution. And then we have a new gateway at 84th and Tacoma Mall Boulevard for 2022, and that's $75,000. We have the Springbrook Park expansion. This is related to the Leween property, an additional $25,000. It actually may come in less, but we wanted to make sure we had it covered for the legal fees, as well as $40,000 for the house removal. You heard also about the north parking lot, the property purchase, as well as improvements that we're requesting. That comes out to about $470,000. And then we added the request for a barn demolition, and this is for the most recent event to storm event. On the transportation CIP side, we're asking to use existing funds within the transportation CIP to add to the chip seal program. We also have some matching funds that we're asking for, and that's $406,000 for the construction on Silicon Boulevard and Far West Drive. We're also asking for additional grant match of $118,000 in 2022. The $300,000 that you're seeing for project, the Safe Routes to School, that's being funded by CDBG. And then we also have input a potential grant for Far West Drive from 112th to Lakes High School and 100th Street to Silicon Boulevard. The grants anticipated there is about $1.3 million, and we're asking that REIT contribute to the match of $139,000. So you heard City Manager mention, I believe it was at the last, or maybe it was a couple meetings ago, where we're adding the City Hall facility space evaluation, and that's $30,000. So those are the new requests. Everything else that you're seeing in the packet are things that you had previously approved, and we're just carrying over the balances. So if the City Council were to approve the request as presented, where we end up in the general fund ending fund balance is $10.8 million, and that's estimated at the end of 2022. Now, this does not take into consideration of any future impacts of COVID-19. So because we're back into another wave of the pandemic. But we still are able to maintain our 4.9 million in total reserves, and then there is the 5.9 that is considered as unreserved because it's above our required ending fund balance. And lastly, here's where we end up in 2022 if all of the adjustments go through. You'll see that the general fund still has $10.8 million. We still have some funding for the real estate excise tax as well as the transportation benefit district. And then our hotel motel lodging tax has accumulated some funds as well. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ms. Kraus? Mr. Branstetter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Kraus, for the easy to follow summary of all the things that are there. And I really only had one question, and I'm looking at page 7, which is 137 of our packet. And there is a park human services program, LASA continuation, about carrying forward $15,000 that LASA was contracted to use for utility assistance program in 2020. But the summary says, but they didn't have the capacity to continue. And I guess in the inquiry that I made by email, the answer didn't say they now have the capacity. It said, we don't know that they don't. And I guess that I would kind of like to clarify that with LASA. Do they have the capacity in 2021 to actually expend that $15,000 on utility assistance? Or are they still in a situation of where they're still overwhelmed by COVID-related other things, and their other work regarding expansion of services beyond that, as to whether that $15,000 is, if it's effective to continue that, or whether it might be used elsewhere in the human services arena. I have no problem with going to LASA if they can confirm that they're going to be able to run that program where they were not able to in 2020.
Mr. Whalen?
Thank you. I had a couple of questions for you, Todd. If you could go to page, I think it's 140 of our packet. First question I have there. It's Fund 106 in the public art piece. We already talked about the wraps. I'm looking at the major art continuation one-time earmark of 131.5. Can you tell me where that's coming from?
So the Public Art Fund receives money for, the rentals of the McGavitt Center. And that's the money that has been accumulating. And so what I have done is just earmark those funds for a major project. The City Council hasn't allocated to a specific project, but those monies are available should the City Council wish to do a major art project.
Okay, so just for clarification purposes, we're in the process for culling and interviewing artists for the quote major art project for the Colonial Plaza. Is that separate and apart, or is that included within?
It is included within, so my apologies. Yes, the city council did allocate some of the dollars, so this is part of that.
Okay. So we had, yeah, okay. I just want to kind of know when we start getting down to brass tacks in that process. The other question I had for you on your last slide, I don't know what page it was, but it was on the outstanding monies for lodging tax that have yet to be spent. Since that's a reimbursement-based fund, we've got 1.8 million ending fund balance. How much of that is really yet to be allocated based upon recommendations that were accepted by council last year?
So what the city council had already recommended is already included. So it's already been taken out.
So that's $1.8 million left to be
Yeah.
allocated by the committee
Yes.
for the next year or biennium?
For at the end of 2022, if the city council allocates the monies that are coming from 2021, if they allocate that full pot, and if they allocate the full pot in the new revenues that are coming in, I should say. So for example, if the revenues coming in is 800,000 and we say that we're going to project out that the city council will allocate the 800,000, after that has been done, the city council will have $1.8 million.
Still,
Yes. But remember, you allocate the prior year's revenues.
Okay.
So it'll be a little less than that.
yeah, I'm just surprised we have so much ending fund balance in that, but that's a good thing because that gives opportunities for the committee to discuss with council down the road. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from Ms. Kraus? Just for a matter of clarification, back to Mr. Branstadter's question about LASA and the money for utility assistance. The line item in the budget, is my understanding, doesn't obligate us to use LASA particularly, and if they don't have the capacity, that can be administratively shifted to another provider. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. When I spoke with Mrs. Dodsworth, that's what the approach is. If they can't, then we'll find somebody else.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Kraus. Now we'll move on to abatement and nuisance code update with Mr. Buer.
Good evening. Can you see my screen share okay?
No,
Well, I have,
I'll tell you what I do when that happens to me. I asked Ms. Schumacher to tell me where to click.
can you see that okay or not?
Oh,
Are you seeing anything, Mr. Mayor?
your face.
Okay. I hear her coming down the hallway. What am I doing wrong? Can you see that, Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. This is a presentation on updating the dangerous building code and public nuisance codes. We examined the codes of 7 cities and 2 counties, as well as some reports by WASAMA, to see what other cities and counties are doing and find out where we could update our code and also address issues pertaining to dangerous properties or contaminated properties. The first thing I will say is every city does it slightly different, and there is no pattern per se. And then some of the codes are actually very similar. Federal Waste Code, frankly, is similar to Lakewood's code. The presentation this evening is 4 parts: basic definitions, administrative practices, current caseload information, and proposed amendments. Very briefly, dangerous building is a structure or building that shows serious defects, unsafe conditions, or is vacant and open to trespass. Abatement refers to the process the city uses to remove a dangerous building or public nuisance, and the making of the cost of the abatement a special assessment. And then we refer to what is a public nuisance via RCW 748120 and 748130. Much of this is actually contained in your staff report, your memorandum, but this evening I'm doing a summary review for the council because I know you have a busy agenda. This is the process we use for a dangerous or unfit building. It starts out with a complaint. If it's abandoned or mid foreclosure, a bank notice. Sometimes we issue an infraction. Sometimes that gets people's attention. Then a complaint notice process, and then a complaint order by the building official. There's a meeting between the property owner, the bank, and the building official, and sometimes we're able to resolve differences at that point. If not, there's an appeal process to the hearing examiner. After that process closes out, then we go to Superior Court to obtain warrant and do those kinds of things. With no appeal process, it takes about 20 weeks. Junk vehicles and nuisance properties is slightly different. It can take 12 weeks, provided there is no appeal. The order is about the same, but there are a few differences. The appeal period is 10 days, and there is no issuance of findings and an order. Just to point out to the council, our caseload at any point in time is between 60 and 65 active properties under investigation as potential abatements or public nuisances. And often they're a combination. They're dangerous and unfit buildings, or they're public nuisances, or they are both and on the same property. The goal is to maintain a list of top 10, although at the moment is a top 12. There's always pressure to expand the list. But if you expand the list, we take away from a focus and then we fall behind. So I try to tell everyone it's the top 10 and we stay on that top 10. For the council's edification, this process is labor intensive, involves many procedural steps with multiple city departments and 2 outside agencies. This is the map of our top 12 right now. We have 2 in Tillicum, 2 in Woodbrook, and then we have a smattering of actions throughout the city of Lakewood. We're not proposing any code changes to the International Construction Codes or the International Property Maintenance Code. These were adopted by the City Council, I believe it was in December of 2020 with local amendments. And it's a wonderful way of addressing many of the issues that face the city of Lakewood when we deal with dangerous buildings. The construction codes and the IPMC work together. We're very happy with the process, and we don't see a need for a change. I will tell you that most cities and counties do not use the IPMC. They use a different process, but this one works for us, and it's very clear on what constitutes a property maintenance issue if it's not addressed in Title 18A. Again, there's no additional amendments being proposed at this time. This slide goes into highlighted code changes. I'm not going through all of them, but I thought I would just speak to the ones that are the most interesting, or the ones that we get ourselves involved in quite a bit. The first one is H, is the erection or use of any building, room, or other place in the city for the exercise of any trade, employment, or manufacture, which by emitting noxious exhaust, particulate matter, offensive odors, or other related annoyances is discomforting, offensive, or detrimental to the health or of individuals or of the public. We really don't have anything in the code right now, and so that was one of the reasons we chose to add this. Next one, L, storing or dumping of any poisonous or hazardous waste, material, or substance in violation of Washington State and Pierce County law that may cause contamination of soil, groundwater, or surface water, or so as to allow uncontrolled access to it by any animal or person. So this is specific to storing and dumping. A little bit later, we go into another section, M. This one is real property in violation of Washington State's Hazardous Waste Cleanup Model Toxic Control Act, RCW Chapter 7105D, excepting therefrom properties contaminated by the Arsarco Tacoma smelter plume. Almost all the properties in Lakewood have some level of plume material on it. And if we were to not add that exception in, we could technically find ourselves in a really unusual condition. So we took that out, and by so doing, we are focusing on the more contaminated properties in the city of Lakewood. R, the parking or storage of vehicles on single-family residential lots in violation of the parking regulations of this code. This is a common occurrence with people storing many vehicles in single-family zones throughout the city of Lakewood. We get into serious, significant public nuisance issues. And so this has been added to give us one more arrow in the quiver. S, any building or structure declared unsafe by the building official or that has been abandoned or unused for longer than 15 consecutive days and has deteriorated, become unsightly. T, any building or structure where construction was commenced and the exterior of the building or structure remains unfinished and the building permit has expired, or any building or structure that has been constructed or modified without a permit. This doesn't come up very often, but when it does, it's pretty significant. We had a motel on Pack Highway where they started construction, then they stopped, then they started making improvements without approval. Then they went through a process to put a gate up, a fence to keep us out so we couldn't make inspections. And we had difficulty with this particular property owner. We eventually resolved it by suspending his building permits while we brought this into compliance, but this would have been a better approach. And this is another interesting one, violation of any of the following City of Lakewood municipal codes. It's basically listing out our Title 12, Title 14, Title 15, Title 17, 18A, and including all adopted sub-area plans pursuant to the Growth Management Act. This is something that Pierce County does. And talking with Eileen McCain, we thought this was a good idea because if you have projects where conditions have been applied to and the developer chooses not to abide by them, then this gives the city the ability to, instead of writing tickets or infractions, we could go ahead and declare it a public nuisance. This would have been a good approach to use on a piece of property where we're having ongoing code enforcement issues at 12718 Gravity Lake Drive. It's also, that particular address also involves a significant number of trees removed without permits. And V has to do with the Shoreline Management Code because it's a special ordinance. It's really not listed in our municipal code, and so it's referred to as Ordinance 718 or as hereafter amended. This is a big one. Painting of vehicles unless conducted inside an approved spray booth. This comes out very frequently where illegal spraying is going on in repair shops. The next one is from time to time, we run across grow operations in single family residences. And usually we find out because there's a big fire. And we've had some discussions about how to address this with, again, with the legal department. And this actually came out of the city of Vancouver, so we thought we would try it. And in the event that we end up with illegal grow operation, we can go ahead and declare the property a public nuisance. We have a current case ongoing right now. I do have a copy of the fire department report. We will use that report in the event that the city council uses or adopts this ordinance to move forward with enforcement action. And then we have a new section, 8.18, and these are activities that are not deemed public nuisances. Compost piles less than 4 feet in height, storm debris, construction debris after occupancy permit is issued, fall debris from streets, accumulation and temporary storage in containers designated for such purposes, generally recyclables, and uncultivated or unintended weeds in native growth areas or in native growth easements or on steep slopes, streams, and wetlands. This comes up from time to time where a person will argue with us that the park has excessive weeds and why aren't you taking action on that? And so we decided to go ahead and create an exceptions clause. And Mr. Mayor, that's the end of my presentation and I turn it back to the council.
Questions for Mr. Buer?
Question.
Ms. Farmer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Buer, it flashed by pretty quickly, and I thought I knew all the government acronyms, but what does WSAMA stand for?
Washington Attorneys, it's an I can't give you the correct name. It's an organization of Washington city attorneys that get together and talk about various land use or other civil issues coming before the various cities or counties.
I think Ms. Wachter can give us the answer.
It's the Washington State Association of Municipal Attorneys, and the organization is fairly closely associated with Municipal Research Services Center. They're not the same organization, but we interact quite a bit.
Cool. Thank you. And is 60 to 65 properties in abatement at any one time? Is that a lot or a little or a middle amount?
It never seems to go down, Councilmember Farmer. That seems to be a steady number. It doesn't go away.
Interesting. So what's being proposed are not changes to what we currently have, but additions to what we currently have.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Brandstetter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Buer, I'm glad to see that you moved to a comprehensive review of the abatement and nuisances code rather than just inserting a couple of things that the council mentioned earlier to do that. So I think this is good work. I had a question about the proposed addition and its paragraph R, or better say, it says the parking or storage of vehicles on single-family residential lots in violation of the parking regulations in this code. And I understand the problems of doing all of that. What I'm wondering is, why are we restricting identifying this to be a nuisance only on single-family residential lots? It seems to me that the very same vehicles and situation occurring in the parking area of a multifamily residential facility would be something that we would equally want to address and be equally problematic to residents.
I see your point, Mr. Brandstetter. You certainly could amend the code to include multifamily properties.
Could it be amended to soon lots in residentially zoned?
Yes.
Something like that, that would cover mixed residential, multifamily. If some sort of a proposed amendment to expand that so that it would be usable in all the residential areas of the city, that would be appreciated if we could see that as a proposed amendment before adoption.
That's not a problem, Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you.
Mr. Bureau, I had a question regarding the storage of hazardous materials. I think it was 816.010 sub L, and wondered why it referenced state and county, but didn't reference federal, since federal environmental laws have some rather stringent prohibitions against certain chemicals.
I didn't think of it, but that's something that we can add if that's what the council wants to do.
I'd like to see that, because most environmental laws are either federal or state, as opposed to anything being county.
Okay.
I've seen byproduct of stacked chemical drums. I mean, it's pretty ugly when you come across it. Any other questions for Mr. Buer? Well, thank you very much. Great comprehensive review.
Thank you.
And we now move to a review of the Lakewood Station sub-area plan. Ms. Spear, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tiffany Spear, once again, regarding the Lakewood Station District Sub-Area Plan, Code, and Planned Action. Also on the meeting call tonight, if you have any questions that I'm unable to answer, is Lisa Burke. She is with Lisa Greeter with Burke Consulting. Apologies. I'll do the majority of the talking, but if there's any questions I'm unable to answer, she's here to assist. So I'll start with the presentation. So on March 8th, the council held its initial study session regarding these three documents, which is a plan, and then a development code, and then a SEPA-based planned action. April 5th, the council held its public hearing, and then considered taking action last week, but after taking a look at some amendments that had been suggested, there was a decision to continue in order to have at least one more study session. So as it stands right now, we're here for one more study session, and then perhaps next Monday you would be taking action. There were some discussions for tonight, just in summary here on this slide. First of all, how the planned action ordinance is organized and what it includes, which is a no action or status quo, meaning if council never adopted the station plan or anything else. And then the planned action, which is actually the preferred alternative in SEPA terms. A discussion of the proposed uses or allowed uses within the multifamily 3 zone, which is something that's been asked about both by council, but also through public comment. The public hearing process for the whole package and whether any additional public engagement is needed per state statute. And then there's a number of proposed amendments to both Ordinance 751, which incorporates the plan and the code, and also 752, which is the planned action itself. So the recommendation there at the bottom of the screen, you'll see is that the City Council adopt the amendments when it's ready to take action to both ordinances that are provided. The city recommended amendments, take a look at and take action on the amendments proposed by Councilmember Branstetter, and then adopt the amended ordinances and have them go into effect 30 days later. So the SEPA checklist includes 2 alternatives, as I mentioned, and within the packet for this evening, there's an Exhibit 1 to the ordinance, which is the SEPA checklist, and that has a table that compares the 2 alternatives, and I'll just walk through this at a high level. But the planned action ordinance has a couple of assumptions within it, and I've mentioned to you that the way this is designed, it's similar to the downtown package, where if a project comes in and its impacts, its number of jobs, its number of people, its transportation impacts, for instance, are within what's assumed within the full subareas SEPA analysis that's been done. They don't have to do an individualized SEPA review when they're submitting their permit. The assumption here is that there's going to be a net increase of about 1,700 dwelling units within the subarea and 1,275 jobs. And so assuming that that holds over time, that is the scope of additional growth within this area as a result of adopting this plan. What you'll see here, though, is the first of the table that compares the no action or the status quo to the proposed action or the preferred alternative. You'll see that there are existing zones, of course, and uses, and there's density ranges. Under the proposed action, you're updating the open space and recreation zone a little bit, not a lot. And then you're allowing a hybrid form-based code at Title 18, Title 18C. You're updating the MF3 to incorporate several new residential uses, including row and townhouses, in addition to what's already allowed. And then, as you'll see over here, there is inclusion of incentives, or the way the code is written, to promote the additional construction of townhouses or row houses or attached single-family units at a higher density than how the area has traditionally or historically been constructed. You'll see here at the bottom that there are some assumptions regarding density. And again, that 30 to 40 unit within the multifamily 3 area is the assumed build out density. Within the transit-oriented commercial, it's up to 54 units per acre, and for neighborhood commercial 2, 35. These densities do not necessarily match the maximum density allowed in any of these zones. This is what's assumed in terms of how these different types of land uses will probably are predicted to develop within the subarea itself. Growth capacity. So here, without doing anything different, it is predicted that there'd be about 1,200 new jobs and 1,343 new dwelling units within the subarea. Over here, you'll see with the proposed action, those numbers do change and they do go up in terms of dwellings. So 1,779 would be the total number of dwellings. And in the job capacity, the thought here is it's pretty much the same, not including Lakewood Landing. So adding those additional jobs to the subarea, assuming Lakewood Landing moves forward as planned. Growth assumptions. I'm sorry, I just took you wrong. I'll ask, sorry, I'll ask Lisa to correct me in just a moment. Growth assumptions, excuse me. The households, 962, jobs, 1193. Under the proposed action, the households jumps up to 1722, and the increased 171 jobs assumed in Lakewood Landing brings you to 1,276. So there is an increase in both housing units and jobs under the proposed action. Within the housing, I touched on this a little bit already, but the idea is that it will densify, and there are several additional allowed types of residential development, but there has not been any rezoning outright of any parcels within this area. There is a focus and an encouragement of missing middle types of housing, and we talked about that on April 5th a few weeks ago about what that means. That stuff that's in between single family detached housing and apartments, essentially. And the idea here is allowing for property assemblage over time, smaller builders coming in and doing niche projects rather than huge swaths of acreage. And then also there is continuing to be, at the same time as all of this focus on new and densification development, there's also the preservation of existing housing that is in good shape. Encouraging updated retail and allowing for mixed use and new commercial is an encouragement within the subarea plan. Currently, it is dominantly service and retail within the subarea. Parks and open space, integrating the open space, and again, this was discussed with the council a few weeks ago. through private open space requirements on developments, and the idea that linear parks, linear open space, green space will be incorporated in road design over time. And that also things like Lakewood Landing, which at this point is a multi-phase 30-acre project over time, would also include public courtyards that people could enjoy. Transportation, rather than comparing that one side does one thing and the other option does the other, the proposed action items are in addition to what's listed on the no action. So in addition to all of these things that will be happening, whether or not the the Lakewood Station package is adopted, there are additional items as well, which is, again, that idea of utilizing, quote, excess right of way, or that which is more than needed for the street design in a particular area for linear parks or open space, enhancing pedestrian crossings or non-motorized crossings. The bridge across I-5 over to 47th is something that will be incorporated and added into the transportation system for this sub area. And then also, in addition, maybe there's looking at street vacation for additional open space or other use of that property over time. Multifamily 3 is currently within the sub area, and it is not proposed to get rezoned to anything. However, within the sub area plan and code, it's suggesting that several additional uses would be allowed within the Lakewood Station sub area. So this table just summarizes that. Neither version would allow detached single family or duplexes, 2 units, but there would be, under the proposed code and plan, the ability to do 3 unit development. There is the ability to do multifamily development outright right now in the Lakewood Station area. This would say, under the new plan, yes, you can, as long as you're also getting approved and administratively approved master plan per 18C. Townhouses and row houses would be allowed, whereas now they are not. There would be no change in the allowance for manufactured or mobile home parks. And then with mixed use development, as it is now, they are allowed in the area, provided commercial is only on the first floor and you have a ratio of at least 4 square foot of residential use to every 1 square foot of commercial. Those 2 would continue to be required in the new version or the new sub-area plan, but there would also need to be a master plan under, again, that Chapter 18C for a mixed-use project within the sub-area. There are several items that are listed just as an attachment right now, because these are going to be coming to the council in a few weeks, actually, under the 2021 comprehensive plan amendments, but these do relate to the adoption of both the downtown and then the Lakewood Station sub-area plan, and reflecting the fact that it has been adopted by council and then incorporated by reference into the full comprehensive plan, updating references to downtown, updating and recognizing key development either that is completed or is planned within the Lakewood Station sub area. So for instance, the Sounder Station is complete. The Lakewood Landing development is not, but it's planned. Updating the population and employment growth targets or anticipated numbers within the sub area. And then there's a number of other sections where either a term needs to be updated or things that are planned have now been accomplished, those types of edits. So that will be, again, in front of you in a few weeks. There's an attachment D that starts at page 458 in tonight's packet, which summarizes public comment and city response to them, but the topics covered are listed here. The requirements or the change in or removal of requirements for parking, both on and off street, on and off street. What are allowed uses or densities within the multifamily 3 zone? The use of city right-of-way near 109th and Kendrick. This was raised first by members of the public and homeowners to the Planning Commission, and then the concerns remain. And then also the planned transportation improvements within the multifamily area of the Lakewood Station District. These latter 2 items don't necessarily relate to Lakewood Station sub-area. These are things that stand as it is now, and if you didn't adopt the plan, there would still be some questions here, but they did get raised just because attention was brought to this as part of the planning process. So attachment D is a table that gives you the comments submitted and then the city's response. One thing to remember as well during this process is Sound Transit is in the middle of looking at what it's calling the Access Improvement Project for Lakewood Station. So right here you see the station, and this is obviously smack dab in the middle of the Lakewood Station sub-area plan. This is a project that was approved through the Sound Transit 2 vote a number of years ago, and it totals up to $44 million as of now. Sound Transit has been working with the city as well as other stakeholders to identify either motorized or non-motorized access improvements to the station. So it's not just at the station itself. It's talking about pedestrian access, bicycle access, as well as car access to and from the station. And in the discussions that have been had, quite a few projects excuse me, have been identified within Lakewood's area. They are still all tentative. They have to go through the current public comment process and then ultimately to the Sound Transit Board for approval. Couple that with, because of COVID, the Sound Transit Board is also doing a realignment of all of its projects. And by this fall, it will be making decisions as to which of its projects, be they Sound Transit 3 or 2, are either changed in timing or changed in scope or both. We don't know how that may affect this access improvement project, but it might. So we won't know the final answer as to what projects within this area Sound Transit may do, but what may do is speed up implementation significantly of some of the things identified in the sub-area planning process. One more thing, the package, as the downtown package did, does include an implementation plan. It identifies items as either ongoing or 3, 5, or more than 5-year time horizons. And it also lists departments that would be responsible for working on implementation, community and economic development primarily, but also parks and recreation and public works engineering. Biennial review is intended to cover at least 2 items, and you see them here. Progress of development within the sub-area, so is commercial and/or residential development happening as anticipated? What's the pace of it? Are there any issues that have been raised by developers as it's happened? And also whether the planned action assumptions, so those things about the number of jobs, the number of housing units, et cetera, are still accurate and relevant, or do they need to be changed? So it's set up to be every 2 years. If the council were to adopt this Lakewood Station District package within the next few weeks, it's an odd year. So 2 years from now would be the next time. Going forward, you would be looking at the downtown area in even numbered years, and then the Lakewood Station District would come to you in odd numbered years. So this is a high-level review of amendments that are included in your packet starting at page 234. And just to summarize and walk through this quickly, of course, I'll answer questions as needed, but making sure that it's clear that the plan description of multifamily 3 promotes rather than just limits development to the 30 to 40 unit range. Clarifying there are some terms that are included in Exhibit 23 of the different types of land uses and residential development that's in the area based on the definitions used by the assessor treasurer. Updating the public engagement process from this is what is planned to be done to this is what was done. The parking requirements that were amended by the Planning Commission, the city is recommending go back to the original language within 18C 600-620. Removing the comment about 2 acres being the minimum size for a master plan in Chapter 18C. And then there's various and sundry scrivener corrections as the plan and the code get ready for adoption and publication and use. And then there are some amendments regarding the housing strategies that Mr. Brandstetter proposed in your packet as well, related to the MFTE program, as well as programs that support the sub-area residents. Within Ordinance 72, 2 amendments are considered. They start at page 238 of your packet, amending the reference of Chapter 364 from Tax Incentive Urban Use Center Development, which is an outdated name, to property tax exemptions for multifamily housing. And then additional Scrivener corrections as mentioned for the other ordinance as well. But just scrubbing one more time, the planned action ordinance and the SEPA checklist to make sure everything is correct. So that is my presentation. I know, however, that Mr. Buer wanted to mention a few things as well with his interaction and with one property owner in particular.
Thank you. Then we'll go to Mr. Buer.
I just a few items for the mayor and the council. When you conducted your public hearing on the Lakewood Station District, you did receive some comments from Steve Borman regarding this project, and he had some concerns. Following the meeting, I had several phone calls and emails, both with Mr. Borman Sr. as well as his son, Seth Borman. We focused our discussions on 7 areas. We reviewed the definitions of row house and townhouses because I don't think the Bormans were aware of that. We discussed the use of condominium provisions in the construction of townhomes. Number 3, Seth Borman had some questions about traffic mitigation. We discussed that with or without the application of the sub-area plan. Under the sub-area plan, what they proposed, they would not create any traffic mitigation needs other than those that are listed in the sub-area plan, which for the most part is painting and eventually the installation of a new traffic signal. We discussed also the processing application for development on the sub-area plan permitting process, how it works. We also discussed the advantages to the planned action ordinance. Then Mr. Borman many years ago submitted a 2017 concept plan in relation to various properties that he owns in the area. Basically, it's a combination of 12-plex apartments, 2 levels, and also a courtyard design. Aspects of the courtyard design would fit probably very closely with the current code. But if Mr. Borman wanted to pursue the apartments, he would have to go through the revised master plan concept. In this particular situation, if he were proposing senior housing, I don't see that this would be a significant problem for the Bormans, particularly when you're constructing townhouse and row houses with multiple levels. Doing something different for a senior style situation might not be a bad idea. I've not heard any comments in opposition to the sub-area plan since we've gone through this with the Bormans. I don't know exactly their position on this at this time, but I did want to share this information with the full council. So, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Buer. There are questions for Ms. Spear or Mr. Buer? I don't see any hands up. So Tiffany and Dave, thank you very much. Well, Mr. Branstetter.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I don't have any questions for Ms. Spear or Mr. Buer. I find that they're there. I did just want to make a couple of comments about the amendment to housing strategies that I have proposed. And there are really 2 of them within the strategies list, and one is really to change the verb from consider to review in terms of reviewing affordable housing incentive programs and the multifamily tax exemption program. Consider is a bit too passive, and review aligns with the fact that the plan is looking for a biennial review of how development and things are going. And we continue to see coming from the legislature and other sources best practices or requirements regarding affordable housing incentives. And so I thought that review was a better verb and better aligns with the fact that we already intend to actively have biennial reviews. The second strategy was a strategy to consider programs to support residents in the LDS as the area redevelops and reduce involuntary displacement. And I'm looking really to delete 3 of the examples of actions that would be considered mandatorily if we included them in the strategies document. And that was a notice of intent to sell ordinance, a just cause eviction protections, and right of first refusal incentives. And my thought was that, first of all, these were a topic of discussion a number of years ago when these proposals were being encouraged by state legislators from King County and wanting to make them mandatory within the state. And secondly, including these in a list of programs being considered, these programs have potentially to be disincentives for residential development to developers. And if we as a council were to decide to pursue one of those 3, I think it would be more appropriate that we would pursue any of those would be considered on a citywide basis rather than just within this sub area. So that's why I was looking to strike those last 3 examples from the strategy.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thanks again, Ms. Spear, Mr. Buer. Great summary. And we'll move on to reports by the city manager, Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good to see you all. Got a number of updates for you. I'd like to start off with actually myself and the city attorney. So we were alerted early last week that the Pierce County Council is looking to introduce an ordinance that would establish hazard pay, a hazard pay requirement for additional compensation for grocery employees working in Pierce County. And it would cover not just the unincorporated areas of Pierce County, of which the Pierce County Council has jurisdiction, but also the incorporated areas of cities and towns. And so when we first learned of this, our first question is, well, can the Pierce County Council even do that? Mandate legislatively within the borders of an incorporated city or town. So our city attorney looked into it, and her conclusion is the answer is no. However, I would like to have her cover the specifics on that. So with that, City Attorney Walkman.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council, I'm Heidi Wachter, your city attorney. And I was asked the question about what the county's authority is over the city. And you may be familiar with examples where the health authority exercises control throughout the county. They actually have that separately delegated authority. On Sunday evening at 7:54, the city manager sent you his update, which includes an attachment that's my written response to the question. And in there are hyperlinked some of the authorities on which I relied. One, and the most pertinent, is the hyperlink to the Attorney General's opinion. The Attorney General opined in 1971, and it's never been overturned, that cities have their own separate authority. The counties have their own separate authority, but the county has not been given authority over incorporated cities. And this was consistent with the research that I had done to that point, which indicated that essentially counties and cities are the same in terms of the creation of them. The state gives each certain types of authority, and each has only the authority that they've been given from the state. And as an optional code city, we have all of the power and authority there can be unless it's been specifically prohibited to us through the Constitution or some other means. So I was coming to that conclusion, and I wound up calling Municipal Research Services Center because I did not find the statute that specifically says counties can't do that. And that's why you need lawyers, so they can figure out how do you get to the answer if you don't have a rule that just says counties can't do that. And when I talked to the folks at Municipal Research Services, it turns out that they've been looking at the question because of the Blake decision and the potential city legislation that may come from that, and whether or not counties would be able to adopt something that would just incorporate or cover the incorporated municipalities. And the answer is no. So that's the information there. There's not a specific law that spells it out that plainly, but my opinion on this is consistent with all the authority that I've been able to find, as well as with the Municipal Research Services Center and the opinion of the Attorney General. So I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you might have. Crickets. I assume that's
I thank you. I forwarded this on to the city manager, I guess concurrently with another source when it first came up. And my simplistic look at it was, well, if they could do that, why don't we have a countywide zoning code?
Yes.
All sorts of dangerous areas that an overzealous county council could invade to the detriment of cities. So I'm not surprised, but I am comforted by your opinion. Thanks. Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Ms. Wachter, I was just wondering whether your opinion how it applies if the county moves forward with the ordinances they currently have it worded as applying to incorporated cities, what you see as Lakewood's response could or should be.
Well, that's an excellent question, Councilmember Brandstetter. In terms of what we should do if the county says this applies to everyone, essentially what they're doing is they're telling our various supermarkets to start applying hazard pay. So the best that we could probably do is to say that that doesn't apply within the city limits of Lakewood. We have excellent business relations with a lot of our businesses, thanks to Becky Newton. She's got those relationships in place, as well as a lot of the city leadership does, and we would communicate our perspective on it. Now, that doesn't necessarily answer what happens if the county decided to push it with them. It's not necessarily, we're not telling them to pay the hazard pay, we're telling them we think it doesn't apply and that there's no jurisdiction. I don't know what collection activities the county is prepared to try. That then takes it down to the county versus those businesses.
Okay, I guess you would say that one option that we have is that we could inform businesses of our opinion.
Correct. We could also,
but legally they are dealing directly with the county.
They're dealing with the county in an area in which the county does not have jurisdiction. And so we would want to concurrently let the county know that we don't believe they have jurisdiction. And in this one, we may want to send it in the form of a letter. We may want to do it in the form of testimony to the county council, but we would also want the businesses to know of the effort that we made, because that's really our lane to protect our jurisdiction. And just as the mayor pointed out, if this, then what else? You know, so we definitely have a stake on behalf of the city in protecting what we consider to be our jurisdiction.
In terms of opportunities to testify before the county council, would that be most appropriate, be a council member or yourself or Ms. Newton?
I work at the pleasure of the city manager.
Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor. So my recommendation is that we prepare a letter to the Pierce County Council outlining our position on this. And then I would like to have the city attorney, if the county council is going to have public testimony on this, to testify on the record, the city's legal position on that. It's our understanding that the Pierce County Council's Human Services Committee, I don't know if that's a committee of the whole or not, but they are going to be, the ordinance is going to be introduced to them this week on April 30th. And then the full county council is scheduled to actually consider it next Tuesday, May 4th. So I would presume, I don't know if they take public testimony at the Human Services Committee, but if they do, we would do it there. If not, hopefully we would be allowed to do it at the May 4th meeting. So that's my recommendation, Mayor, and that's the direction I'm looking for from the council.
Thanks, Mr. Caulfield, and I think that sounds like a sound strategy.
Mr. Whalen.
I was going to echo that. I think we just need to prepare and have the letter sent to the county council. Probably should send it to our county council district member, Ms. Hitchen, and let her know that it's on its way to the committee of the whole there, as a courtesy.
Yeah, it was, she was a co-sponsor. As a former union rep, she should probably understand that the unions have negotiated a contract under Federal Relations Act.
Not
I
surprising.
would expect that the Albertson Safeway group would jump all over it. But
Right.
I'm more concerned about city jurisdiction.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyone else?
So Mayor, if you could maybe just help me out with consensus of the full council on this in terms of the direction.
Send a letter.
Great.
Send a letter.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Next.
A few more updates. Got a couple of emerging items that happened late on Friday and into the weekend. The first is the Pierce County Executive Bruce Stanmeyer created a task force, actually a Pierce County Vaccination Task Force, and actually had his first meeting this morning. It appears there's at least 60 organizations that have been asked by the executive to participate. It includes a wide range of private companies, nonprofits, as well as public agencies, including the city of Lakewood. And so I was there representing the city of Lakewood. The purpose of the task force, and you'd like to have a kind of a push on this the next 6 weeks, is to promote and assist people in Pierce County to get the COVID vaccination. I think, as we're all aware, everyone 16 and older in the state is now available for the vaccine. Within the county, about 20% of the county have actually gotten both doses for those where you have to take two. And then a little over 30% have one dose. That does not take into account Jblm, since their vaccination process is being handled by the federal government. So countywide, it's probably much greater than 30%. The good news is that the vaccine supplies are flowing into Pierce County. At the same time, it would appear that demand or people wanting to go and get the vaccination seems to be waning a bit. So hence the county exec's initiative to kind of do a push on this. And so we're going to bring our resources to the table to try and help that and get the word out. For example, here in Lakewood, the health department and the Pierce County Emergency Management set up a storefront at the former dress barn in our town center for folks to come in and get the vaccine. And that's on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I think it's from 8 to noon. Also, later this week, the health department in Pierce County, as well as the city of Tacoma, they're going to be opening the Tacoma Dome. And I think it's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be every day, but certainly during the week, from noon to 8 a.m. for folks to come in and get a vaccine. Pierce Transit is going to be providing transportation, and they're going to be doing both drive-through and walk-ups, no appointments necessary, though if you want to make an appointment, it's our understanding you can do that. Also, Pierce County Emergency Management is also looking at ways about how to get further out into East Pierce County, where there seems to be a real need. And, Pierce County has some mobile units. Matter of fact, one of those mobile units was in the Springbrook neighborhood last week, and we continue to have conversations with them about bringing them back and getting into some of our specific neighborhoods. So I just wanted to update the council on that the city of Lakewood, we're now part of this task force, and we're going to try and get out there and get the word out and get folks vaccinated. The county executive also pointed out, we're in phase 2. So also a key part of this initiative is to improve our metrics that the governor has established, so that, number one, we don't slip back to phase 1, which quite frankly, I think would be catastrophic, particularly for our small businesses and just everybody in general. But rather to improve our metrics so that we can get back to phase 3, and then of course get beyond that and get back to some level of normalcy. And I did hear a term today that I hadn't heard in a while, and that's getting to herd immunity, if you will, on this pandemic. So again, just wanted to give you an update on that. Another item that came up on late last week was the city of Tacoma is going to be holding some public hearings this week, as a matter of fact, on a proposal to create non-interim tide flat regulations, including regulating fossil fuels. This body might remember this is something that the city of Lakewood and SSMCP has been monitoring going back to 2017, when the city of Tacoma decided that they were going to undertake a sub-area plan for the tide flat area. SSMCP again sent a very similar letter that they have sent in the past, which is they're concerned about the provisions that would prevent new fossil fuel facilities, as well as limiting the expansion of existing facilities. And the reason being is because that's the lifeline of Jblm. It's a lifeline of Jblm as it relates to our national security. It's their lifeline as it relates to their ability to provide humanitarian aid as well as disaster relief, which they do on a fairly regular basis worldwide. And so SSMCP has taken that position. Likewise, the city, we are working on a very similar letter that we have in the past, and we're looking to send that over probably either under my signature or Mr. Buer's signature later this week. We also learned from the EDB that the city of Tacoma is looking for feedback and letters primarily from the business community. And so I know the EDB and a number of the Chamber of Commerce are out there alerting folks, and particularly businesses, to these, again, non-interim tide flat regulations that the city of Tacoma is looking to perhaps put in place. So again, a couple of emergent items that just occurred over the last few days or so. The state legislature finished up the development of their 21-23 biennial budget, and the city of Lakewood did very, very well from a financial standpoint. All 3 of our state capital budget requests were fully funded, one for Wards Lake, one for American Lake, and then one in partnership with LASA, so that they can expand and actually grow their client services center. In addition, the state legislature approved a funding level for a wide range of park programs that fully fund, until I'll just cut to the punchline, the city's getting $3.7 million, which is pretty phenomenal. And that's going to help with American Lake Park, Wards Lake Park, as well as the final piece in the puzzle for our turf infields down at Fort Steilacoom Park. So phenomenal results there. And, that's just, again, a reflection of the strength that we have with our state legislators from the 28th and the 29th district. Also, on the SSMCP front, we'll be able to secure another $1.4 million in support of the North Clear Zone acquisition, as well as So there is no transportation budget or no new transportation budget. However, SSMCP was able to, somewhere in the budget, the state legislature was kind enough to appropriate $5 million to do some study work across the I-5 Nisqually Delta area, which is something that we've been working in partnership, not just with SSMCP, but the Nisqually tribe. I think that might be one of the few new transportation initiatives that was funded in the whole state. Even though, so since there is no state transportation package, new package, if you will, they might have a special session later this year, or certainly they'll take it up next year. Our request for $250,000 for our multimodal study didn't make the cut this time. However, at the operating budget level, the legislature did also provide $621,000 in support of our partnership with Western State Hospital for our community partnership program. So some very good news there. We have scheduled some time on your agenda on May 24th to do a deeper dive into the successes of the session. And so we'll have our team here on that evening to be able to, again, go into a little bit more detail. Likewise, I would strongly recommend that the mayor and the council, that as you've done in the past, is to invite your state legislators from the 28th and 29th district and recognize them. And as you heard from Senator Conway on more than one occasion, Lakewood is one of the few cities that actually does that. And he's always so gracious, as well as the rest of them are. But particularly since we have a couple of new ones, I think it would be very, very nice for you folks to do that and, give them a little proclamation expressing your gratitude for what they did. They worked really hard down there for us. So overall, I thought, we did very, very well. Actually, on the non-money side, though it translates into money, House Bill 1189, tax increment financing. So I'm not going to declare victory yet because it has not yet been signed by the governor, but we're almost there. There actually potentially is going to be tax increment financing in Washington State. And so that has been a key priority for Lakewood, as well as for a number of cities going back, me personally in my career over 20 years now. And so it looks like it is across the finish line. It's not the full meal deal of tax increment financing. For example, it doesn't bring the strength of the state's financial resources, but it does allow us to be able to do something. And if it is signed into law by the governor, we'll be working with some other cities and AWC and some other folks to see, where in Lakewood we can use this, as well as, of course, in support of Lakewood Landing. So more to come on that. One of the key items within your current biennial budget is to add a second mental health professional to our behavioral health contact team. And so our police chief, Mike Zaro, has negotiated an updated contract with Greater Lakes Mental Health to do that. And so we have that on your agenda for your review and consideration as part of your next regular meeting. And it includes the existing mental health professional that we have, who is Carolyn Sear, and then another one who would start on July 4th, again, as outlined and included in your adopted biennial budget for 21 and 2022. I talked about the state legislative priorities on the federal front. Things are moving along quite well there as well. As you know, we've received notification that we're going to be getting $14.86 million in ARPA monies. As part of your May 10th meeting, we have a follow-up update and discussion with you regarding something that you had asked for, which is, developing a communication strategy to get some additional feedback and input on how those monies could be invested into Lakewood as we look out the next 2 to 4 years. In addition, we understand that the Treasury Department is finalizing guidance on how the monies can be used, which is above and beyond the specifics that Congress has already provided. And so we're waiting on that. Also, as you know, Congresswoman Strickland asked us to submit some funding requests. The first was in support of their congressional priority projects. We submitted $4 million in support of the Nyanza project. What we learned is that members of Congress are allowed to pursue funding for a total of 10 projects across the entire district. So we're hoping that this is the one for Lakewood that she's going to fund. Likewise, she reached out to us on the transportation side, a different federal bill, and asked us to submit a project. And so we submitted the last phase of South Tacoma Way from 80th or 88th all the way up to 80th, which is the last segment, not just in Lakewood, but within that whole corridor. And we also got a letter of support from the city of Tacoma. The mayor was kind enough to do that. She was actually very pleased to learn that we were pursuing that. So it's the Tacoma mayor going to the former Tacoma mayor. So I'm thinking we're doing pretty good there. And on this particular program, members of Congress are being provided a flat amount of $15 million. And that can be allocated across however many projects they wish. And we're requesting 2.4 million out of that 15 million. So again, hopefully that will pass muster there. We expect to know probably in the May or June timeframe whether or not both of these projects are going to move forward for full funding later this fall when Congress considers those bills. We also continue to work with our congressional delegation. This item is being led by Congressman Rick Larson up north, and that is to create a transportation funding program for medium-sized cities. As this body knows, we've been working on this for a number of years, and we're also working in partnership with 15 other similarly sized cities in Western Washington on this. The good news is that it is moving along, and we do expect language to be introduced to allow for that. Even though we have no plans to travel back to Washington, D.C. at this point in time. Matter of fact, I was supposed to travel back to the Pentagon this week and then for some meetings, and then they canceled it. They said, nope, can't come back. And so now we're going to do our events online. However, we do think it would be beneficial to have some virtual meetings with our congressional delegation like we have in the past. So we'll be looking to schedule those meetings here in the next month or so. And typically, it's myself and the mayor and our government relations contractor, and then typically another council member or two. Certainly, I'll leave that to the mayor and the council and who might want to participate on that. We're also waiting to hear from Office of Economic Adjustment. They're actually called something different now, and I have not learned that new acronym. Regarding the Defense Community Infrastructure Program, they expect to open up the grant process here in the very near future. I thought it was going to be this past Friday, April 23rd, but we're standing by and ready to go on that. In addition, I've had conversations with Jblm leadership about getting a good, strong letter from the garrison commander stating that this is a key priority, and so we're set there. Also want to thank our Congresswoman for sending a letter to IMCOM Command down in San Antonio, Texas, regarding some of our difficulties in obtaining the federal funding to be able to close the deal on acquisition of tactical tailors. So now we're working it from the congressional end as well as from the military end. So hopefully that will pop here in the near future, and then we can close that deal. Getting back to the state, the state budget and the state legislative session, one of the bills that was approved by the House and the Senate was 1016, which creating or making Juneteenth a day of remembrance for the day of African slaves learned of their freedom, a legal holiday. And so we do expect that that's going to be signed by the governor. If it is, we would like to maybe put that on the agenda for council to discuss, and whether or not you want to make that a legal holiday here in Lakewood or recognize it in some shape, form, or manner. So just want to kind of give you a warning order on that, and just give you a heads up. Also, if you hadn't heard, Western State Hospital, their CEO, Dave Holt, good guy, just recently retired and moving on to the next phase of his life. And they do have an interim CEO who actually is currently serving as their deputy. And so he has been appointed. I have not had a chance to meet him yet, But I do not expect that to have any impact on the good, strong working relationship we have with Western State Hospital. Meanwhile, we continue to wait from their parent company, DSHS, on an updated Western State Hospital facility master plan. And we keep hearing, well, it's coming soon. So as soon as we hear something, I'll be sure to update the council on that. Also, something I recently learned, did not know this, but United Way, you know, in the city, we have a very good, strong working relationship with them. They're celebrating their 100th year anniversary here in Pierce County. I don't know how that got through under the radar, but I was contacted by them last week. And one of the things that they want to do to celebrate their anniversary is hold some food drives within Pierce County to help those that need some help. And one of the locations they want to do it in is Lakewood. And so we've allocated some of our staff resources to help them, whether they want to do it maybe down at Fort Steilacoom Park or at City Hall or wherever they want to do it. We want to help them out. And here in Lakewood, they're going to be partnering with EFN, the Emergency Food Network, which is also based here in town. And they're looking to do it on May 14th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. But just wanted to pass that on to you. The last item that I have, which is something that's actually, it's been going on for the last month. And Tiffany Spear, our long range and strategic planning manager, has been diligently representing the city of Lakewood on this. But it's on an ad hoc committee that the Pierce County Council created at the end of March, last week of March or so. And it's an ad hoc committee to end homelessness. And the goal of the Pierce County Council is to develop some kind of a comprehensive plan by the end of this year on how to go about doing that. So Ms. Spear, again, has been representing the city of Lakewood on that. They've had 4 meetings. I think they were meeting on the Wednesdays of each month, beginning on March 31st and then April 7th, the 14th, and the 21st. I understand from Ms. Spear that a draft action plan or an outline of one of some sort was made available today and is going to be presented to the Pierce County Council, is my understanding, on May 3rd. And we haven't seen it yet. I know, I believe Ms. Spear, like I said, it just came out today. And so we want to look for some time to brief you folks on that. I don't know what it says or what's in there, but wanted to just, again, give you a heads up that this is coming, and we want to try and identify some time at a future council meeting to give you a briefing on that. And if possible, what we'd like to do is, if we get our hands on it, which I understand, I think we do have it or are going to get it shortly, we would like to share that in advance so you can have a chance to review that. So that's the update that I have, and certainly if there's any questions, I can try and answer them.
So any questions for Mr. Caulfield? I actually have an answer. OEA is, I remember it now as Old Community College. It's old, OLDCC, Old Community College.
All right.
So, have to have something to remember it by.
It doesn't quite roll, Mayor, as OEA. I will say that, but it's good to know.
Ms. Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not touching that one. Well, congratulations, Mr. City Manager, on the TIF. We'll keep our fingers crossed that the governor actually signs it and it gets across the finish line. I know how long you've worked on that, and that is definitely going to benefit us and others. So congratulations. Will the dates for the vaccination clinics that you mentioned at the Tacoma Dome and the Dress Barn here in Lakewood and any others will that information be available on our website?
Yes, it is. And I know some of it's already out there that we have. And again, we want to do a stronger push on that on a more regular basis. So for example, when they announce the Tacoma Dome later this week or tomorrow, I guess, yeah, we want to stay out ahead of that. Absolutely, Councilmember.
So speaking only for myself, I do play in the social media realm and do have folks that I communicate with on email. And so I would love it if somebody would email me and let me know, and then that way I can turn around and push that information out. That would be helpful. Juneteenth being a national holiday, state holiday, I learned today that it won't be a paid state holiday for state workers until 2022. So I honestly don't know if that exactly when that goes into effect.
It's not, the reason being, Councilmember Farmer, is because the state legislature's rules are that most bills, unless specifically identified, go into effect 90 days after they recess. So since they ended the session on yesterday, April 25th, it goes into effect July 25th, which obviously is beyond the date of June 19th.
Yes, exactly. All right, perfect. And one last question. Do you have an update on the spring cleanup? Because I continue to get questions and I'd love to be able to respond.
Yeah, we did. Actually, I think I included this in an update. Myself and our communications manager, we had a debrief with Waste Connections personnel. It was about five of them including their general manager last week. And so we wanted to hear from them what their thoughts were on how they thought things went. And, overall, they thought it went well because it was very, very busy. And so we asked them, well, why did you think it was busy? And they attributed it to several factors. Number one, the good weather. And they also commented that because of the good weather, and the reason they say that is because the experience here in Lakewood was very similar at a number of other transfer stations. And they used the Hidden Valley transfer station as an example, where it got so busy there that they had to shut down for an hour in the middle of the day just to play catch up. And so that was one. The other was the city actually sending out those postcards to every resident in town because they too observe folks with the card as they came in. And then the big item, one of the things that they observed compared to previous events was there was a good number of commercial vehicles that came through this time as opposed to previous times. And they noticed a lot of U-Hauls, those white box trucks, even trailers, but the trailers weren't too much of an issue because we've seen those in the past. And what they observed was folks that had those big trucks, when they would back up, typically, this type of a program, folks roll up and it should be, a few minutes to unload your stuff and move along. Well, these trucks were taking 20, 25. There were several who took 45 minutes to unload. So that created a significant jam in the process. We also asked them, well, how did this, we didn't do a vehicle count this time. We didn't have the clickers, but they did communicate to us that, based on the number of lanes that they have open. And by the way, on the Saturday that I was there, I was told by a couple of Waste Connection staff that normally they have more lanes open than the 4 that they have. But then as part of the debrief, we learned, no, they've always had, or in recent memory, they've had only 4 lanes. And the reason being is because just for safety issues for, both the folks that are attending there as well as the staff that are up on the ramp. Some folks do have a bit of a challenge, backing up, whether it's a trailer or vehicles and such. And so they want to give folks plenty of room. But when you apply, the number of lanes and they say, average of 5 minutes, the number of vehicles, is about, 200 every 4 hours. So over a 6-hour period, it's about 300 or 400, which is consistent with what we've had in the past. So again, their read of it was a lot of the large vehicles that were coming through that were serving as a significant roadblock to the unloading up on the ramp. They also commented, which actually I wholeheartedly agree, this is supposed to be for, residential property owners. And so, coming in with, their stuff. So that's something that we want to have a conversation with them about if we want to continue to allow that large of vehicles in the future, as well as even some of the larger trailers. One of the things that they pointed out is, if you're going to have trailers of a certain size that are manageable. but also can perhaps accommodate, some good sized stuff, a couple of couches and a refrigerator or two, so that folks can truly get rid of what they need to get rid of. But again, the big items that they had pointed out was the large vehicles. The other thing that they pointed out that they suggested that we probably need to address in the future, and they've observed this over the years, is folks who are pulling their stuff out and dumping it. For example, they don't have proper footwear. There were folks up there with flip-flops on or sneakers, which is just not safe when you're operating in that commercial industrial type environment. So probably in the future, one of the things we want to do is encourage people to make sure they have proper clothing and footwear on when they're up there unloading stuff. So that was some of the outcomes that we've heard from Waste Connections. We told them we'd like to get back with them in the next month or so and have them kind of think about how we can do a better event or address these issues. And likewise, we're going to do the same on our end. One of the things that we did ask them, we said, later this summer, do you have a window of time where maybe we could do another one? At this point in time, they don't, just given their schedule, their commercial activity down there. But certainly we want to continue and start planning for the fall event sooner rather than later.
So before we go to Mr. Brandstetter, I'd just like to note that happily we can attend a Zoom city council meeting with flip-flops on. But Mr. Caulfield, on the large vehicles, you might look at where Pierce County Solid Waste and Waste Connections are changing the rules with respect to recycling materials, yard waste, and starting to charge commercial. And they have my understanding is they've come up with a definition that draws a line between what you can bring in free and what you can't. Think of, I don't know exactly how it's defined, but think of pickup load versus big truck or a big trailer. So that might be something we might want to look at as to how to make it available, although it is good to get rid of big truckloads of garbage.
And that's one of the things that I had plenty of time on Sunday to talk with folks who are stuck in that line and not moving. And we did invite people to rent U-Hauls and bring their stuff in. So I would love to see us take a measure of responsibility here and figure out if there's anything we can do to help facilitate people cleaning up their properties. I would appreciate that. I heard all sorts of interesting stories about how other jurisdictions do their spring cleanup days and take advantage of places that might not be within a transfer station. And so I don't know again what exact conversations staff are having, but I'm still interested in seeing if we can't do something to make this right before fall. And I can't remember when we have the next one scheduled. It's late fall, like October, November.
Councilmember Farmer is usually in the October, November timeframe. And again, it comes down to, the availability of, Waste Connections in terms of, their business when they do have, a window available for us.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, thank you.
Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Caulfield, regarding the vaccination center that's going to be at the Tacoma Dome, and you mentioned Pierce Transit was going to provide transportation. And I know to take Pierce Transit to the Tacoma Dome from most of Lakewood, it's 3 routes. With 2, so are they planning something that's more in line with like the buses that they send to the fair, where there'll be a pickup point in Lakewood, and maybe that's going to stop one other place but takes you to the Tacoma Dome? Or what does that mean they're going to provide transportation?
So that's what we were told this morning, is that Pierce Transit is providing free transportation, and that's what we know. So whatever strategy that they're going to put in place, we'll be able to communicate that to the community once it's released. But as far as how they're going to go about it, we don't have that yet.
Okay, as long as it's not just publicizing what routes to take to try to get there. Regarding the Juneteenth, although the state official holiday won't be till 2022, I would be in favor of us doing something this June and recognizing it. I think that there are those in the community that would appreciate us doing that and appreciate it to have some formal recognition there to go on. One of the items on transportation funding, and you mentioned there wasn't a new transportation package, but and it kind of ties into the Jblm North Access route, is where have we gone on the funding for the bicycle route that was being no longer running along I-5, but is now going to run and then run through a portion of Lakewood after it comes off of the North Fort Road. Did that funding get established? Is there something about that funding being able to be used by the city for the areas of the city that are going to be a part of that route?
Councilmember Branstetter, we don't know that yet. WashDOT is still working through the specifics on that. So they haven't reported back to us yet.
So you don't think that's impacted by there not being a transportation package?
I don't know. What I do know is that WashDOT said that they were going to report back to us, all the stakeholders who were involved in that, once they had, they had a decision on how the monies were going to be made available to accommodate that. I do know that right around the beginning of the session, I did follow up with, the local administrator for the Olympic region, and he did communicate to me that it hadn't been those monies had not been pulled or paused or anything along those lines.
Okay. And then with respect to Waste Connections, I think, I guess I'm disappointed that there's not a way that they could find a weekend somewhere between now and August where we could do another one, even if we had some cost to us. But I do think that when next time we update our contract with Waste Connections, which is where the 2 a year sits, that one of our objectives in a new contract should be to at least get to 3 a year. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And just to add a thought on that, Mr. Caulfield, I had asked about that when this whole issue when it came up, and one of my concerns was that the volume through, which is part of the package, was less than normal, so that Waste Connections, if the volume was less, was providing less in value than was contemplated by their agreement with the city. Now, there may be a compromise in here where I think they're not being able to find time is probably more driven by economics than it is by availability. That facility isn't particularly high traffic. This is a COVID impact. So if we could slice off some of the federal money that is many times going out fast and not necessarily targeted, Waste Connections might be able to find some time. So if there's a compromise in there, it might be worth asking about anyway.
And Mayor Anderson, we are waiting on what the total weight was of garbage and debris that was collected.
Because they save money on the tipping fee, which they pay themselves. Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's the garbage business. That's couple of questions, Mr. City Manager. Do we know the vaccination rate in the city of Lakewood, or do we only know the county numbers?
We have only seen the county-wide numbers at this point in time. I haven't seen any.
Okay. So we don't know any Lakewood specific numbers.
I don't.
Okay, so when I look at the state capital budget, there is a number, and this has been true the last few sessions, quite a bit of stuff at Western State, including at 51 million for a new forensic hospital and
That's just the
16.6 million. Huh?
Yeah. That's just the design.
And 16.6 million for a treatment and recovery center.
Mhm.
What is that? What do we know about that?
So that's that, Councilmember Boki, that's the activity over by 87th, where they're doing some expansion. It's not directly it's part of Western State Hospital, but it's different from Western State Hospital. I can get you some more detail on that.
I thought it went by a different name. I thought that was the child study and
Yeah, that's a
treatment
different.
center.
Yeah, and I think
So are they
that's-
changing the name?
I think that's what it could be, because they are going through
Yeah.
some improvements over there.
So is any of this going to happen before they're done with the plan?
They have to.
I'm trying
they
to
need
figure out how not having a master plan works with two new buildings.
Well, the forensics facility can't move forward, or any of those new civils commitment centers that they're looking to build, whatever they're doing down there can't move forward until they have an updated master facility plan.
Okay.
And
Okay.
again,
That's all I
you know,
got.
And again, I'm not trying to be facetious here, but they've been working on it for 20 years, and I don't know why it's a bit frustrating, because, Pierce College, Clover Park Technical College, St. Clair's, the list goes on. A number of public agencies or nonprofits have done master facility plans. And like, for example, Pierce College did theirs, there was seamless, it's a similar organization, it's a state agency. And not only were they able to get it done in a very efficient and streamlined manner, they're already moving forward with implementing it. So just waiting.
Okay. Thanks.
So before we move on, I just note on the Tacoma Dome Vaccination Center that actually fires up tomorrow. I think it runs for 6 weeks, at least as it's currently budgeted. And the Pierce Transit transportation assistance is providing free rides, not additional buses. So it's something like showing a printout of your appointment. They'll let you ride the bus for free, but it doesn't indicate that they have any direct line. It's on their existing lines. So if there isn't anything further, it's time to move to an executive session. Is that correct, Mr. Caulfield?
That's correct, Mayor. Unless I think you also have council comments on your agenda.
Yeah. It seemed like we were there. So council comments, Ms. Moss.
Good, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Branstetter,
I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bulkey,
I got one item. I don't want to steal Mr. Whalen's thunder. I actually want to kind of bring this to the front. I noticed when we go through the capital money from the state under a heritage grant, there's Lakewood Gardens carriage house rehab and accessibility improvement for $414,000, which is, I think, about less than 20% of the total cost, if I remember from Councilmember Whalen's comments. I want us to begin to consider, there was discussion as travel recovers, that at some future point in time, I don't know that that would be at the retreat or something like that, that we have a discussion regarding the use of LTAC dollars to help them with that capital lift that they've got, that they're looking at. If the state's willing to put in 414,000, I think we should look at giving a portion also out of our LTAC dollars, much like we do at the McGavick Center. And so I just want to plant that bug. So that's all. Thanks.
Ms. Farmer.
I wanted to say a public thank you to our state delegations from the 28th and the 29th, and I will be reaching out to them to give them some quick kudos and send them some love. I would hate to wait until May. I wanted to throw my name in. I'm interested in the government relations event with our congressional delegation if there's room. And then I also wanted to report that the work that I've been doing with the Sex Offender Policy Board, engrossed second substitute Senate Bill 5163 is on its way to the governor's desk for signature. It was transmitted today. So I'm very, very excited that the legislature enacted almost every one of our 30 plus recommendations, and in particular, the fair share principle, which means that in cases where a sexually violent predator has been deemed qualified for release, conditional release to a community, DSHS has to consider the county of origin first, or give it a lot of consideration, even if that county doesn't have a lot of treatment options, so that there's a fair and equitable distribution of releases. And so the work on this will result, the hope is that it will result in more treatment opportunities and all the amenities and all the critical infrastructure that these folks need in their recovery. And so I'm excited about the future for this and the work that we put together. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one thing. I was able to attend at Jblm the Children's Museum ribbon cutting on Saturday, and that was pretty amazing. It's an amazing facility. I believe they said it is the only children's museum on any of the bases right now, and it's in conjunction with the Children's Museum that's in downtown Tacoma. It was just really fascinating, really great to see, wonderful turnout, and I was happy to represent the city there.
Thank you. Mr. Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Boki, for the comments on Lakewood Gardens. They have been working on that grant request for some time, and they're very pleased to receive it, waiting for the governor's stamp of approval on all the budget documents. That is a large project that will consist of a redo of the carriage house out there. You may remember that's where they have the little plant sale, and that will be completely redone to historic standards. It will include not just kind of an entrance facility, but also a little bit of a kitchen area to have more events so they can be more self-sustaining. It will have an artist and residence apartment up above and a second story, and more historic artifacts and such about the whole place. So more to follow on that, but I was pleased to see that they received their funding. Today on the Arts Commission, we met as a subcommittee to review the first 2 of 6 artists who have presented to the Arts Commission with regard to the public art project there at the Colonial Plaza. So more to follow. We have 2 or 3 more meetings this week. And that's why I was a little bit late getting to this meeting, because we went right up to the very hour practically. But very interesting. We are pleased with the very good quality of the artists who have submitted and have been selected for the first cut. We'll whittle that list down to probably 3. They're going to provide some sketches and proposal ideas for council's consideration. So we'll follow along and we'll keep you updated. That's all I have.
Thanks. And now we will go to executive session. Recess into executive session for approximately 30 minutes pursuant to RCW 423110 1B, to consider the acquisition of real estate and pursuant to RCW 4231.10.1I, to discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation. The city council will come back to regular session following the executive session to take no action other than to adjourn. We are in executive session. Going to extend for 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
extend for another 10 minutes. extend for another 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And if we're unmuted, I guess we're adjourned.
Thank you.